Institute is the author of the book, The Hmong in Wisconsin, and she will have copies here available after her talk for a donation to her organization. It's part of a series of books on ethnic groups in Wisconsin by the Wisconsin Historical Society Press. Mai Zong grew up in Kaukauna, went to Lakeland University, is an alumni of UW-Madison, and currently she works for the Wisconsin Department of Health Services in Madison and is the board president of the Hmong Institute. She is also a cultural trainer and folklore performer, including Hmong poetry, song, and she's been a storyteller since 1997. She's been a tireless advocate for the poor for the last 35 years, especially the Hmong people and refugees. She began to advocate for her family, extended family, and then the Hmong community in the 1980s. Mai Zong's advocacy and grassroots activism led to the development of the Hmong and refugee women nonprofit agencies in Wisconsin and Georgia to provide human service, health and women's empowerment, and leadership services for refugee women, refugee family strengthening program, a domestic abuse program in Wisconsin, and the Hmong Studies position at UW-Madison, the Hmong Language and Culture Enrichment Program, and the Hmong Institute. Nationally, she has served on a variety of boards that improve the lives of others. Internationally, she volunteered as a delegate to global gatherings that aim to advance the status of women and children, including the State Department's Hmong Lao Overseas Delegation to Laos in 2011, the Hmong American Delegation to Napo, is that how that's pronounced? Napo Refugee Camp in 1996, and the United Nations 4th Conference on Women in Beijing, China in 1995. She's received numerous awards and honors for her tireless effort in serving the poor, including the YWCA of Dane County's Woman of Distinction, Authentic Hmong Leaders, and Trailblazer. Her topic tonight is who are the Hmong in the Fox Cities? So please, a warm AHS welcome to Mai Zong.
Thanks for having me. How are you all doing? Good, good. So just so I know, how many of you have friends or neighbors that's Hmong? Okay, quite a few of you, okay. How many of you, this is your first time talking about this topic of Hmong? Okay, some of you, all right. So I will do both, and if you have a question, just raise your hand. I like to have a more conversation than just me talking at you guys. And so ask question if you have a question. Otherwise, I can also talk. So this is me. Right here, that's me in Laos right before we escaped to the refugee camp in 1975. And then this is me growing up in the refugee camp right before we left to the United States in 1980. And then I chose marriage, education over marriage, so I become a really old maid by Hmong standards of 31 before I got married and settled down. My mom is like, so what is the next excuse? I'm like, Mom, I want to travel. Okay, you've been here, you've been there, you've been there, so what's the next excuse? I want to have a house. I bought a house, and then she say, okay, now what? And finally, I gave in. And I have a bundle of joys. I think those of you who are mom knows, the great joy of raising children. I just took my youngest, she's 17, a junior in Madison East right now, to see college on the East Coast. She wants to fly away from mom. And so I reflected by saying that arriving as a teenager, I did not know anything about colleges in the United States. Never heard about prestige college like Harvard's or Princeton's or all of these. And being able to see it with her is such a great joy to know that the education system in this country is so rich, and our kids are so fortunate to have those. So tonight, I'm going to just give you a brief history and then talk a lot about the Hmong refugee experiences here in Appleton. I grew up in Kaukauna, but Appleton is the next big city where we get all the exciting things. And between Highway CE and Kaukauna and Appleton, it used to be a huge gap, right? And so coming to Appleton is always a joy and excitement because you get to be in a big city. Compared to, Paper Mill in Kaukauna, we're small and just a couple street down, we're done, right? So that's what I will be sharing a lot with you, which is my own experience, plus the people I work for. I worked for the State Refugee Office, since after my college graduation, and been there until 2012, and then I finally said, okay, I can't get any mental health program for my, underserved population, so I'm gonna go to DHS. So then I took a job at DHS, and knock on door, develop policy to develop mental health program for Hmong and other refugees and so forth. And last month, I retired. So I am now a free bird. I can talk about anything I want now. So many of you probably know why the Hmong came to the United States is because we were involved in the Vietnam War. And many of you probably don't know that Hmong is a product of the Vietnam, meaning that the Hmong people in the United States, there's Hmong people all over the world, like the Jewish people. But Hmong people who resettle overseas to the United States, to France, to Australia, and so forth, they are products of the Vietnam War because they served in the Secret War. And after the U.S. withdrew its troops in 1975, the Hmong were marked for extinction. There's a radio campaign saying, wipe out, the Hmong people. So in the Secret War, there's 3 roles that, our parents play, and that is rescue down pilots who were shot down into Laos. They don't know the territory. They don't know what to do. And so when a helicopter goes down, 10 Hmong men typically go out and search and then rescue the pilot, bring them to the village, hide them, feed them until help is on the way to come and fly them back to base. Another role that we play is spying for intelligent information. So that way, between the Vietnam and South, there is a trail that goes right in through Laos called Ho Chi Minh Trail. And the spying is to spy for information so they can bomb the bridges, so that way the transportation back and forth would not be convenient. And that's protecting the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So that's the 3 roles that our parents play. So again, in 1975, we have no choice but leave. Many people may not make a distinction between refugees and immigrants. Does anyone know the distinction between immigrants and refugees? Mm-hmm.
One of them would be killed if they returned to their home country. Is
Yep. So immigrants, they know who's on the other end waiting for them when they come down the airplane or when they, get off the car. For refugees, they have to leave because if they don't leave, they will be killed. And so they don't know where they're going. They don't know who's on the other end of the line waiting for them. They don't plan. They leave because of safety. Whereas for immigrants, they plan because of economic opportunities. So they know where they're going. So with this distinction, the integration, the acculturation experiences are really different. For example, my father didn't want to come, stay in the refugee camp as long as he could. My older brother turned 18. He got himself to be the head of household, got us to come, left him behind, and then he had no choice but have to come back, and follow us. So that's the whole experience of refugees and immigrants. So in refugee world, there's a lot that we don't talk about because we don't have time. And oftentimes when we talk about refugee experience, we'll talk about hunger, we're talking about being shot at, and we're talking about having nothing but yourself and each other. I'm going to read, a short excerpt from the book, and you guys can follow, but this is just. So this is the refugee journey on page 13. After the fall of Saigon, the United States withdrew the rest of its ground forces from Southeast Asia and airlifted about 2,500 Hmong soldiers, including General Vang Pao and other high-ranking military leaders, out of the country. The remaining Hmong experienced genocidal retribution for their role in opposing the Patha-Lao. Word spread of a mass shooting in He, where communist soldiers shot, injured, and killed hundreds of Hmong who were trying to leave the country through the capital, Vientiane. Bao Vang of Boston, later a regular vendor at the farmer's market at the Capitol Square in Madison, was a victim in this mass shooting. For the Hmong in Wisconsin, Bao's uneven and scarred face became a living testimony of the violence the Hmong faced following the war. Bao described the incident to me in 2013. I was young and just got married. My parent-in-law said everyone must leave together the next day, so we did. I witnessed 2 family members die that day. It happened so quickly. As we marched forward toward the bridge, my uncle on my right side was shot and fell to the ground. Then a bullet went through my son-in-law's forehead, out of his left ear, and sliced my left face. My son-in-law fell in front of me. Both of them died while I carried them. So these are, horrifying stories that we don't tell our children because we don't want to pass a secondary trauma to them. But it is deep inside people like Bo and people like my parents who, like a balloon, don't want to pop it. If they pop it, nobody's going to catch, all of that. They don't talk about it, but if we ask about their story, they can tell us, and we should be ready to hear them. Otherwise, they can be, very traumatizing. So here is, a photo. After the General Vang Pao was airlifted, thousands and thousands of Hmong people journey from the highland down to the lowland in preparation to cross the Mekong River to Thailand. And once they're in Thailand, they are safe because now they are refugees and they're not with the threat of the enemy, at night, during the day. So this is why the Hmong came to Appleton. a lot of people ask me, why Appleton? Why Wisconsin? It's so cold. And I say, yes, I agree. If we knew the geography of the United States, all of us would go to California. But we do not know who's on the other end. We don't know where we're going. When we first got here, I thought, man, American people are strong. They can walk so warmly. They must have really warm blood. Well, later I discovered there is so many layers of garments that people put underneath that keeps them warm and walk straight. So through sponsors, people like Barb Beeble in Green Bay, I don't know if you know her, she's a young person who worked with the Green Bay Diocese in the 80s. She's responsible for finding sponsors. And sponsors then, sponsor the family, and then the family come. And that's how we came to the United States, is through sponsorship. Similar to how we didn't welcome the Vietnam veterans when they returned here in the United States, when the Hmong came, it was very secretive as well. Not anybody know about it other than the sponsorship. And so because of that, not many people know about it until, things started to look different or feel different, or people hit, different ripples, challenges that they know that, oh, these are Hmong people, right? So sponsors were a big part of bringing us here. The first Hmong family to arrive in Wisconsin is right here in Appleton and Wausau. So 2 families came together in an airplane, and one got dropped here in Appleton on January 31st, 1976, and then one went up to Bandol, a little town outside of Wausau. So that's the beginning of Hmong resettlement in Wisconsin. I did a lot of talk with Father Vanderbilt when he was still alive, when I was doing the book. And he tells me stories that I just laugh, and sometimes I, cry, but we had a good time. And he said, I got my team together, a team to help my Tao and Sang drive, a team to take care of the children, a team to take them to ESL class, a team to take them to work. And so he assembled like 7 committees and ready for this family of 7 people. And then they're all excited, and then landed the plane, came my Tao and Sing's family, and the interpreter couldn't speak to them. And Father's like, why? Why can't you speak the language? Well, because I'm Vietnamese and they're Hmong. And so Father's thought, oh, all people, all boat people? I thought my Tao and Sing are all boat people like you. And the interpreter said, no, Vietnamese people came by boat, so yeah, we're boat people, but these are not boat people, So that was the impetus for the Father Vanderbilt to learn more about the differences between, the different type of refugees. And that's the same. So I show this picture here because here are sponsors. Sponsors who take on their family, oftentimes mentor them, shelter them, and protect them, make sure that they become good citizens. When I say shelter, I talk about, like the little egg that needs to be developed from the yolk. The shell has to be, protecting the yolk, so the yolk becomes a little chicken, and when the chicken comes out, then they can be on their own. That's what sponsors oftentimes have to do, because they know that their neighbors don't understand about who they are, and if they hit racial discrimination, they would be, damaged, right? So then they do a lot to protect them and to shelter them and make sure that they grow, healthily. And so we're very thankful for sponsors who have great commitment to the families and making sure that families are surviving. So in Appleton, you don't know, but Appleton is a very important city with a lot of historical stories about the Hmong resettlement, and that is, when Hmong first came here, Hmong don't have any social structure, right? The US policy, like usual, do not promote asset within the community, but doing what they think is good for the community and for the country. So the US policy said, scatter them throughout the United States so then they can learn and integrate fast, right? So for the Hmong people, we are a clan structure, we're a clan system. And if you work in the 80s, you go crazy because if you're a social worker and all of a sudden tonight your family moved to California because they discovered that their relatives is down there, and they just pack everything in whatever they have and take the bus or drive or whatever. The next day you couldn't trace because you have no clue where they went to. So that whole policy kind of backfire where people go wherever they need social support, right? So by 1980 in Appleton here, we have this gentleman. His name is Chu Veng. When the war broke out, he's an educated man in the military. And so he came here, he got the social organization in Appleton and the social system organized. By first, they have to think about their own well-being. People were going to die. When they die, what do we do, right? How do we properly bury our loved one? So, So they created a sunshine fund to take care of funeral homes, making sure that you can bury your loved one when they die. And then next, they can't eat hamburger all the time or potato all the time. So what do? They create the first Hmong grocery store in Wisconsin, and I was told probably in the nation. And they call it, the first name that they had was Asian food. And then when the general visited them, General Vang Pao from California, the general said, oh, you live in America now. You're not living in Laos anymore. So you should make sure the name also includes your new hometown. So then they changed it to Armour Asian Valley Food. So then that way it also signified their home here. So they sell food, and I just learned, James just, introduced himself to me that he used to inspect this grocery store with my sitting and tell. And so after that, they formed a nonprofit called Hmong Fox Valley something, I forgot the old name, but the new name now is Hmong American Partnership. It's on Calumet right now. And so this became that structure to help the Hmong in Appleton, in Oshkosh, in Green Bay, and then they expanded and expand. So Chu is now in St. Paul, but his legacy lived here with all of us. So starting a new life all over again is really the clothes on your back that you came through, and that's it. You don't have anything else. So we were very fortunate to have Hmong clan leaders who were fighting in the secret war, trained by the Americans. And so this is Singh, the store owner, and he used to fly with the American pilot. So he's the one that tells the pilot, drop the bomb right here, drop the bomb right there, because they don't know the territory when they bomb the enemies, so that's his role. He got shot, injured today. He is a little bit, his left hand or right hand is a little bit slow. Do you remember, Jim? I don't. You don't, okay. And then a small piece of the shred is still in his brain. they don't want to remove it because that would, mean death for him. So he still lived with that every day. So with clan leaders like these, they are either kuti, extended family of the husband, or they're the ninja, extended family of the wife side. So they come together and talk about how to support each other, right? And then they make sure that the roles and responsibility within the families are exercised. And that is, in Hmong culture, birth order, gender, age plays a big role on how you operate within the family. So for example, I always say to the young girls, don't marry the youngest son if you don't want your in-laws to live with you. Or if you're lazy and you don't do a lot of work, don't marry the oldest son because he's the leader. He's going to have people on his end every day, and he's going to lead, and that means, a lot of responsibility because you have to make sure you take care of your younger ones, right? And so roles and responsibility are also things that the clan leader have to navigate and make sure that everybody, operate and form the community. So in starting that new life all over again, like any human being, food is a challenge, right? Because all of us grew up with whatever food we ate when we were baby, right? And as we grow up, we acquire the taste of food. And when we later have to change that palate doesn't change in us, right? And so food become a challenge. And most of you probably don't know, but we're lactose intolerant, so we don't do dairy, right? So when we got here, our sponsor was so nice, and they brought us these huge, beautiful cheddar cheese bar. They went home, we opened it, and the aroma of cheese just like, woo! And we just quickly, shuffle the bar of cheddar cheese back to its bag and zip it up and put it in the kitchen cabinet. So we did that. Our sponsor came back. She thought, oh, they liked it. They ate it. Next day, bring another cheddar cheese bar. One day, she was looking for something in the kitchen, and she went to the kitchen, and she opened the cabinet, and there lies her beautiful cheddar cheese bars all untouched. And I tell that story to say, it was a good gesture and good intention on their part. Only if I knew how expensive cheese is, I would have asked her to buy us some delicious jasmine rice, But I did not know, right? So food is a challenge. My children, they're born here. You would think that they would eat it? Of course not, because they grew up in a household where we cook, rice and food all the time. When they arrive home, the first thing they open the door, what do they say? Mom, what's for dinner? I am so hungry. Well, you just ate lunch at school. Why are you hungry? Well, I don't eat hot dog. I don't eat pizza. So that acquired taste and food, become a challenge. But then after a while, you get used to it. Like now, if I don't cook with cheese, I would go crazy, right? But then it was not the case. Language, same thing, right? You come in, you have to learn a new language. The elders say you borrow your mouth to, speak somebody's voice. And so learning a new language is also harder for older people, right? I came when I was 14. I was dumped in high school, so I learned ABC. Like in the ocean, I didn't want to sink and die, so you learn to paddle and you learn to swim, and then you get rescued. My parents, they're older. They didn't want to, not that they didn't want to learn, but they didn't have the time. They're, too much, and then they believe that they can't learn a new language, right? So then they don't learn much about it. I put the yard sign here because when you guys see yard sign, what do you think? Normal, right? What do you think?
A sale.
Huh?
A sale.
A sale, yeah.
Rummage sale.
Rummage sale. And that's normal, right? Well, for us, learning a new language is not normal because we have to understand what it means, right? So my best friend, Professor Cha, who teaches at St. Cloud, told me her story about learning English, and I just laughed off, the table, because she said, American people, I don't understand them. When I was learning English, I did not understand the whole thing about yard sale and garage sale, and I asked myself, why would people want to sell their garage? Why would people want to sell their yard? And if I get there and I bought it, how do I transport it back? And if I transport it back, where would I put it? Because I already have a yard and I already have a garage. And so I just laugh. I just like, oh, yeah, you're right. And so those are things where language, we learn it. It's normal. We understood the meaning of it. But if you're new and you're trying to learn a language and you're really trying to learn the language, you would just go crazy when things like this got thrown at you, right? Or so I used to run the women's project, and so I have all these Hmong women. I'll tell that story later when I come to it. So anyway, so culture clash is the next one. After food, language, culture. Now that we're in our home, we have some food to eat, we start to go out there, we start to interact with our neighbor, particularly at school. Our kids are required to go to school, so we have to be at school. There's culture that clashes, right? So now people start to know about who we are. So then the clashes usually happen. There's a complaint because there's lots of cars parked on the driveway or on the street. Or at funeral home, there's somebody's phone. At funeral home, there's long hours and lots of cars, so the traffic, the people, right? So oftentimes that becomes the clashes. The other is because our culture includes sacrificing animals, right? So sometimes people need live chicken, so they may bring the chicken home. And the neighbor may see them plugging it in the backyard. And then, they call the police on them, right? So that's where culture clash comes in. And then later, as we lived in, the racial tension started. And then as we integrate into our society, we have to think about what do we keep? What do we let go, right? Or do we just let go of everything, assimilate, and totally leave our identity behind to become Americans, right? So then these become challenges, and I'll spend more time talking about them. But I have a story that I always tell because I think it's important because A, is very therapeutic for me. I'm still healing. And B, I think, we're all humans, and building our own stereotype is very natural. So this story is why are the Americans so white? So in the refugee camp, when I was we left, right? But I was this when we entered the camp. So in the camp for 5 years, we have this blonde, blue-eyed, tall American who's working with a church affiliation. I forgot the name of the group, but every day in the camp, he would wear a monk pants, long black pants, carry a Bible, and he would walk from one section of camp to the next section. So there's a big pond on section 4, where he would walk from section 1 all the way down to the soccer field, past the soccer field to the water pond. And this is a man-made pond that was made for us, in the refugee camp, so we can bring water to water our garden and so forth. So as children, the attraction of the day, the highlight of the day is to go find this American guy, Why? Because he's tall and blonde, blue eyes, and we were down to his waist. So imagine, you're a child, you're curious, right? So I would go and, finish my chore, carrying water and water the garden, and then after that I would be a spectator, go find this American guy and see where he is. And it's not hard to find because he's always followed with a group of kids. So it's always loud and visible. So I would make my way there, navigate through the crowd, and then stare at him. And I go, oh my God, his eyes are as blue as the sky. His ears perk up like mushrooms. His nose is, as big as my father's pipe. And then I had enough. Look at him. I would get out of the crowd and ran home. And I would ask my parents, who is this monstrous-looking guy? Why is he so different? Why is his eyes as blue as the sky, his ears perked up like mushroom, and his nose as big as your pipe, Dad? Who is this? And the answer is always, he's an American from America, right? So for years and years, when we landed in, so our sponsor was in Illinois, a little town called Monticello, so we landed in Chicago. So February 1980, fresh snow on the ground. I look and look on the airplane as it's about to land. The country is nothing but white, pure white. I study and study for a long time, and then I turn to my brother who speaks some English, and I said, oh, I get it. The American people are so white because they live in a white country. And so we got down the plane, come the door, open the door for us. Our sponsor is just like this gentleman, tall, blonde, blue eye. And we're like, oh, here we are in America. So anyway, I tell the story because then after 2 weeks, my sister and Sing and my child live here, so then they bought us groundhog bus tickets, so we got here. And I started to question, oh, who are you? Who are you? You don't look like this guy. So are you not Americans, right? And so that was the beginning of my American history, is learning, oh, who are the American people? Why are they not the same? Why don't they all look like this guy, right? And so I tell that because I created my own bias about who the American people are. And for the rest of my life, I have to undo that. So again, language, I talk about food, dairy, many people still can't do that. The other piece I haven't talked that it's still affecting us, but not as much because now we have children who speak the language. We have people like me who work in the government, so we're trying to make things more accessible to the community, and that is, access to services, going to the doctor. When you don't speak the language, you're so afraid to go because you don't know what the doctor's going to tell you, especially if you have an illness and you're getting diagnosis, right? Or education. Our system in Laos, we give pride and joy to the teacher and the school system. That means if my children go to school, you're the teacher. You're responsible for disciplining, teaching, and mold them, right? So that means if you need to discipline them, it's okay, you can discipline them, right? Whereas in this country, the parents didn't understand that that's the system here, so then they dropped the kids at school and they thought everything was fine until in some household in the early days where the children are given the powerful role of interpreting, right? And doing PTA times with the parents. Guess what the students say? Oh, I am fabulous, even though, I feel a great time, right? And so that's the difference in the culture, and assessing the system is not accessible because of language, and then on top of that, the whole system and the culture within the system is different as well. So we have a lot of challenges in that. Same thing with the legal. A lot of interpretation of the legal system also is different. So like in the book, I talk a little bit about the very extreme case in Oshkosh where a Klan leader hanged himself in jail because of an innocent mistake of the teacher who didn't understand the culture of coining in the Hmong community. Do you guys know that culture? Where if you're sick, you have a headache, you have a tummy, we rub coins into a certain part of our body, and the more purple, the darker it is, the better you get. So the teacher didn't understand this whole custom of healing, right? And so she called a social worker. The social worker called the police. The police went to the home. The Klan leader had company. There was lots of people in his home. The police just came and handcuffed him in front of everyone and took him to, police station. And they, like normal, they put them in jail, hold them in jail before, they talk about it, right? And he was so humiliated and so embarrassed, he would not know how to face, the people and all of that. He hung himself in jail. Just, because somebody didn't understand the part, So there's a lot of legal issue that went through, that we learned, that the system learned, that we have to merge and learn about each other. Same thing with government. Sometimes we're not very responsive to government because in our country, we came from a country where government is dictating, right? And so you want to avoid the government. So there's a lot of those. Employment. One of the things that Hmong refugees have to do is when they get here, they're starting their life all over again. We have all the men go out to work, still don't make enough money to pay for the basic living of rent and food, right? So then what do? We develop what we call a customized employment training, where we train the women how to sew, how to work in assembly line and all of this, and put them in places that would accept what we call subsidized employment, right? The government gives you 6 months of money to pay this person to work for you, and after that, you should hire them, right? Because it's that introduction time where you get to know them, whether you like them or not. And so, we're thankful for Anchor Food, Kimberly Clark's, Jack's Pizza, or Goodwill. These are popular places for our Hmong women to work in the 80s and 90s. And the best thing is, they ask for more Hmong women after they hire the Hmong women because our Hmong workers are very, very hard worker. They don't, skip. They don't just call in sick. They take the job seriously. So that turned out to be a really nice relationship for them. Survival languages. So I talk about my mom and my dad a lot because that's what I see every day. But other mom and other dad have the same challenges in learning English. And that's the attitude of how old you are, can you learn, how much problem do you have at hand, and so forth. So this is my beautiful mom. My mother wants to learn English so much that while we're at school during the day, she would ride the bus from Kakana all the way to downtown Appleton, all the way back. So she would have the opportunity to sit next to someone who speaks English. And then she would say, my name is Tao. What's your name? And that's how much she wants to learn English. When she doesn't ride the bus, she'll go to the thrift store. And she'll go, look at this. And then the clerks will come, can I help you? And then she'll have a little conversation. So that's how she learns her English. And then, at night when they offer ESL classes for the adults, then she goes in and learns another an hour or so of English. And I tell this story, and then she learned from us too. As teenager, man, we are just tired of telling mom, okay, we have homework. Wait, I gotta do my homework first, And midnight, she's still hanging on to her book and trying to learn. And then you just feel like, oh, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes of my time. And then you go tutor her, and then she gets to learn. So that's how she learns her English. And my father, on the other hand, said, I'm not going to be able to learn a whole new language. It's just a waste of my time. So therefore, I am too busy, disputing issues in my community because my father is a big clan leader. And so even when he arrived here, people still come to him after they know where he is. So in our household, we're always busy with people. So he has that behavior, the attitude, believing that he won't be able to learn English. So he doesn't learn English. Culture clash. So I talk about culture clash a little bit. Some of these folks, you probably remember them if you work in the refugee program, like Joe Vang. He changed his name to Joe because it's just easier to pronounce than his Hmong name. So he, acculturate really well by saying, okay, I am Joe Vang, right? And then we always, of course, have story that we laugh about Joe because at one time we were meeting and we're waiting for Joe, but we never know who Joe is, never knew who Joe was. And we're waiting, and he came, and we're still waiting. And then we finally asked, who are we waiting? And I said, waiting for Joe. Oh, I am Joe. Because we were expecting him to be, an American guy. So anyway, so Joe is very responsible with social service and employment, job service, where he's coordinating and all of that. So he's like the first Hmong in Wisconsin to work for the state as a, state employees. My Tao, this is my Tao. She held, job as culture broker, navigator, negotiator, educator. She does all of that because of her English and her ability to really build relationship, especially with police stations and the court and so forth. And then Cha's wife, Chong, she's a big person with making sure that everybody's needs are met. So she works with Catholic Charity Diocese. So she did a lot with the church. And Cha is someone that also helped out with the MIA. So with young couple coming into the country like this, they were the navigator. They're the one that really built in that infrastructure in the beginning in making sure that our needs are met. I think I'm going to skip this excerpt because we don't have a lot of time. I'm not sure how much time I have left, so I'll go. But integration. So the biggest challenge that we have in culture clash in the integration is birth, marriage, and death. These are the passage in life that calls for big events. When you have a newborn, everybody's happy. You have a newborn. People come to see, is it a boy? Is it a girl? What is the name? And then on the third day, you do a big celebration, hupli, or soul calling, to call the soul of the baby and welcome him or her to the family, right? So it's big, big event in people's life. Marriage, same thing. You raise children, now they're settled down. They're an extension of you. Now, two families come together to celebrate the young people's new union. And also to make sure that they know that they're not marrying just the two of them, but they're marrying the two families and the two clans, right? So that means introducing to uncle and aunt, and that means large feast and a 2-day event, right? So then that draws lots of people. So for example, here is a wedding, a Hmong wedding where, bridesmaids are related to the bride, and then the groom related to, the groomsmen related to the groom. And so that time in marriage is also very, very important. So a lot of people come because it's called establishing relationship, right? And then death is another big event in people's life that draws a lot of people. The older you are, the more experiences you live, the more friends you have, meaning the longer funeral we will have for you. Because it's a time to put closure for you, and your friends and everybody will come and say their goodbye. So, for example, my father's funeral is 24/7 for 3 days. People all over the United States come and will constantly, fill the funeral home with crowd coming in and eat. And there's a ritual that happens throughout the time. So Hmong traditional funerals is 3 big parts. One is returning the deceased soul to his or her birthplace. When that's done, then all the living 12 representatives of their life come in and really look at what kind of life did this person live? Do they owe anybody any money? Do they, how many offspring do they have? What kind of life do they have? So they come in and kind of trace down what kind of life they have. And then the last part is sending them to their new home. So that's why the funeral is really long. So these are the integration part in our society that oftentimes, is very challenging because, again, it generates a lot of crowds. This picture here is the typical hupli, or soul calling, where it often involves an egg, white string, and the chicken, but we don't see the chicken in this picture. And that soul calling can be done for newborn, marriage, death, all of that. And then this is a picture of funeral, a typical funeral. So see all the paper here, the deceased casket right here, and then all the activity here, there's a drum. And so if you go into the Hmong funeral home, you think it's so unorganized because you have no clue what's happening. But there's lots of procedure happening at the funeral home. And then, when the ratio comes, the ratio is a little bit subtle. In, the Midwest is not as in your face as in other parts of this country. So our parents are pretty wise, and they just say this phrase to us, patient. Patient is not going to kill you. You get spit at, you get the middle finger, whatever people do to you, just be patient. So that's all we do. We just be patient and walk away. Or some parents would say, some parents will say, study hard, and be their boss someday. And so, when it's verbal, nonverbal, we're fine. But then there's incidents where hate crime took place because of people's behavior towards, what they don't like, right? So, for example, a couple of the hunting incident that happened here in Wisconsin, right? That really shake the relationship and tested the relationship of the Hmong and their new home when that happened, right? And you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. No, some of you don't? Okay. So there was a hunting incident up in Rice Lake that happened back in 2007 or 2000, I forgot what year it is, that a Hmong hunter entered a property that was private, and he didn't know that he had trespassed it. And there were 6 Caucasian with him and confronted him, and he had to defend himself. So he shot at them and killed, I think, 4 of them. And so that became a national news because, they think that he just hate them and shoot at them. But in our point of view, if he didn't shoot them, he'd be buried alive and people would never know. And so in his defense, he, did what he could. And then after that, a gentleman in Sheboygan, I think a couple years later like that, was brutally murdered by a white person in reaction to this, where he killed the Hmong hunter, tried to bury him with the leaf and all of that, and then he was discovered. So these hate crime really, tested the relationship of the Hmong people and their new neighbors and relationship, and it's a huge thing. But again, for us, we learn to tolerate because we're told to be patient, right? And so our children are growing up to be very individualized, and that's our fear, is that they're not going to be patient and be patient. They're not going to tolerate the way we tolerate. And that means, life in the future might have more interaction on behavior issue rather than verbal, right? And that's very problematic for all of us to think about. In Appleton, we are very fortunate. Many of you probably have a lot of relationship with Mayor Dorothy. She is so generous in her leadership, where she embraced us. She come to our Hmong New Year's and let us, do the hoopli and tie string on her, or she would come to our home when we invited her. I mean, she participate like she is our leader, and she is, our leader, right? So she gave us that warm welcome in Appleton that really make us feel like, oh, okay, even though the citizen may not understand who we are, the leader knows who we are. And that gave us a lot of strength for, study hard and work hard because of Mayor Dorothy. So Appleton had the first, outdoor New Year in 1980, where ball tossings were happening outside rather than indoor like this. And after that, we've been having outdoor Hmong New Year for a while, and then I moved away, so I don't know what happened to the outdoor Hmong New Year, but now we have it indoor. In the integration, there's a lot of challenges with young people and as well as religion. Our young people need to feel like they have support systems. So they would gather like here, have a picnic together, right? And sometimes some people don't understand why they have to be together and speak the language, right? So then people will walk by and give them the finger or do things that shows them that they're not welcome there. But that's the only way that they know how to stay together and provide support for each other. Some parents converted to Christian when their sponsors are, from churches. So then they, baptize, and then they go to church, and then they become regular church member, and that's how they live their life, right? Some people that are still traditional may do it because they have respect for their sponsor, but they may not go to church every day, right? They may do the Hmong ritual at home, but go to church on Easter, Christmas, big events, but may not do it daily, right? So the challenging part is oftentimes this causes a lot of rift between brothers. We have this one brother who came early, and he's a leader in the community, and he still has family back, and his brother grew up in the camp, became a religious leader, and he became a church leader. So when they reunited 10, 15 years later, they couldn't do things together because one is still doing the old way and one is doing the new way. And that conflict, doesn't really strengthening their relationship. So that kind of challenge, happens a lot when we integrate because of religion. Our youth continue to, do whatever they can to be a normal youth, right? So they do picnic, trying to introduce themselves to new activities and be normal, but sometimes the parents don't understand And the parents are saying, why are you wasting time doing these things? Why are you not home helping them, right? As my mom would say to me, you go to school, but you come back and go to the garden with me. Okay, Mom. You know, so then in my time, I can't do tennis, I can't do volleyball, I can't do anything after school. I have to go home, right? And so our younger teens who really wanted to do some of that are getting labeled and getting frustrated from the parents. And the tension grew because they want to be normal by doing normal teenager things, right? And I have a lot of unnormal teenager story that I can tell, but we'll do that in a different day. Integration. So we learn to, I apologize for my title on the bottom. That was from my old presentation. Now you know where. The last place I went to is the Hmong Horrors Library. So we learn to, you know, also insert ourselves into Appleton events, right? I don't know if any one of you participate in, you know, Flag Day Parade here in town. Huge thing, right? It's always a fun thing, and for us, you know, going out there, showing that we are here and wearing our clothes and being a part of the heritage, you know, it gives us that sense of home as well. And so trying to integrate into the system, you know, really is important for us. And we would, you know, go when we get invited. This particular parade, this is me. I don't have the picture that I lay down on the float where when we go down the college, all the kids say, mermaid, the little mermaid, the princess mermaid. So I got a really beautiful name from that parade, and I treasure that all the time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you give us an idea of the dimension of the refugee? How many people came over how many years, and at present, approximately how many
Sure.
people are in this area?
Yep. I'll do that at the end. I have a slide at the end that I'll give you the demographic information. Mm-hmm. But in the war, the first fight, we lost about 30,000 Hmong men. Yeah, just within a short, maybe 10 years, that window. And then, yeah, I'll talk. Mm-hmm. Well, I can talk about it now.
Was that during the war or after the Americans left?
This is during the Secret War.
Okay.
So in the Secret War, the United States, you know, had a covert operation, right, in Laos where they dress normally. They don't dress like they're military, right? They go into the city, and then they recruited General Vang Pao, who was a captain at the Royal Army at the time. And then he had the negotiation, and there was the talk where things were promised to him that if, you know, the war is not in their favor and we lost the war, then, you know, the American people would take care of the Hmong people. So there's that interchange conversation. And then he recruited all the Hmong to go and fight in the war. So the Hmong men started off, and then when the Hmong men died, most of them, and they needed more people, they recruit young Hmong men as young as 10, 12 years old. I was in a hurry and I didn't put the picture in the slide here, but in the book there's a picture showing a young Hmong guy that he is 10 or 12 and the rifle is as tall as him. He is now in Madison, so we have a lot of, you know, interaction with him because his experience just speaks up for the whole Hmong experience where the husband died, the sons are replacing them. And so there's a lot of casualty. And then also Laos is bombed so heavily more than any other war. And right now there's still a lot of stuff on the ground, that mines on the ground that has not been uncovered, so it's dangerous, so people can't go. Because if you go and you knock on it, it blows up on you, right? Does that help a little bit on the number? I will talk a little bit towards the end. Anyway, integration. Gender reversal is a huge thing. So traditionally, Hmong women are responsible for all affairs internally. And then the men are responsible for all external affairs, right? Well, when we arrived in the United States, things got challenging because the roles has reversed. People like my mom, the mom, usually have a belief that says, despite whatever happened, despite how hard it was, we are here now. Let's move forward and let's take care of the children, right? So then they learn to speak English, go to ESL at night, do what they can to learn English, go get their driver's license, and then pretty soon they're doing all the external affair, going to PTA meeting, driving to doctor's appointment, driving this and driving that, right? So the role reversal got ugly at some point where there's a lot of misunderstanding between husband and wife, and so that's when I came in, and after college, I developed the domestic abuse program because there's a lot of mistrust, and then it kind of got to the violence side where we have a few cases that got really physical. So in the changing role among women, we have to teach them about, okay, accountability in the workforce means going to work, but also you're working with the men 8 hours a day. Don't be too friendly with them, or don't let other people see you be too friendly with them, because you come home and you'll be, having talks that says, why are you dating so-and-so, right? So we do a lot of education to kind of soften the ripples and help the women understand about their new role and all of that. And so pictures taken with our Hmong Women's annual conference. This is me and my jean with all the leaders. And so I have a lot of stories that I love to tell about Hmong women and their role and all of that. But I'll tell you, we also have Caucasian caseworker who work with us, and they become friends too, right? So for 15 years, Sherry is a case manager. She goes in the home to check on her Hmong families. And when she gets there, they loved her. And they open the door, they smile, and they say, hi, Sherry, you come. And she say, hi, yes, I die too. Because she said it in, she doesn't understand the tone in Hmong. When a tone changes, the word changes, right? So when the Hmong said, hi, Sherry, got here. And she said, yes, gutua. She didn't say gutua, right? She said gutua. Can you hear the drop in the tone? And so that shifted to the word die. So she intended to say, yes, I come too. But then because the tone dropped when she said it, yes, I tua, right? And then it dropped. So for 15 years, Sherry's been saying, and the Hmong family just giggle and laugh, and her coworkers just laugh, and they move on. Until she has a new coworker. And then the new coworker said, what did you say? Did you know what you said? And she said, yeah, I said I come too. And he said, oh, no, you didn't say that. And then after that, Sherry's not too bubbly, so she's more cautious about it. So we have lots and lots of stories like that we love. So one story on traffic stop. I love the story because this story tells about the role reversal of older Hmong women. So we have Hmong women who's doing, all the external role because, again, they speak the language, they can drive, and the husband's a little bit slower, they can't drive. So there's the big general, Vang Pao comes to town, about maybe once a year, and then there's a big meeting where all the men go and listen to the general's update to see what's happening, in the refugee world and how to plan for the next winter, whatever the subject, right? So there's a meeting held in De Pere between Green Bay and Kaukauna. Those of you who know De Pere, right? In the restaurant over there. And the couple in Appleton, they were going. So the wife was driving the husband there. And the husband wanted to get there so early, so he kept pressing the wife and saying, go a little faster, go a little faster. And she's just like, couldn't do anything, so she kept going faster, faster, and then right past Kaukauna on Highway 41, the state patrol turned the light on. And then she realized the police is after her, and she got scared, so she went a little faster. And then the state patrol, spoke and said, turn the noise on. First, it's just a little light, right? And then he turned the noise on. So she got even more scared. She wouldn't stop either. So then he went around to the other lane, and then he took the blowhorn out, and he said, pull your car over the shoulder. Now she got even more scared because she's saying to her husband, my car's so big. How can I do that on my shoulder? Because she could, she only understand the word car and pull, over your shoulder. She's thinking the shoulder is her shoulder. So she got so scared, and she just kept going, and then the state patrol just went in front of her and forced her to, stop. So anyway, the moral of the story is learning English sometimes, when you don't understand all of the definition in a word, you can, misunderstood it and frighten yourself even more, right? Because you don't understand that. So in the changing role among women, they went through a lot like this, where oftentimes the intention is good, but they may not know how to do it, or they may not get the right word, and they just get scared, right? So my first job was in Sheboygan, and I got my mom really, really scared because driving to Sheboygan and Kaukauna is about 45 minutes on a good day, right? On the winter time, it could be a couple hours before you get home, right? So when I get home and I open the door and all the smokes of incense pop out like clouds, you know what I know? My mom's been worried to death about me and my safety, right? So anyway, I left my job in Sheboygan and took the state job. Anyway, so I have to do the interview with Dean Curtis, the owner, and one of the women interview for the job. And again, she didn't quite understand all the term that she's bursting out, right? And we all kind of looked at her, and Dean, our owner, was so uncomfortable, but we all just kind of like, take it cool. So she got really nervous, and then she said, oh, Dean, I am so hot. And so, that was not cool because you're interviewing with a big boss and you're telling your big boss you're really hot. So women go through so many different experiences because of the different things that they do. And so I just love my traffic story. In the early time when we came, 50% of our kids are under the age of 18, meaning that our community is very young. And so we have to do a lot in terms of working hard to make sure that our children, are having the opportunities. And when racial challenges hit, again, we taught them to just be patient. And good thing, some of them took their parents' advice, so they have, become success stories in our community where they become educators, they become professors, they are business owners. They are helping us, build capacity, and they're becoming, active in civic engagement where they even run for office, And so the success of our struggle is starting to show, now with all of the different individual, like these little kids becoming the 1.5 generations. So this is my dad. Compare him to my mom. He's a clan leader, so, he's always in his suit because that's respectful for the people that he worked for. or comes to him. So the story for my dad, he doesn't want to learn English, but then there was one time he wished he had learned English. And that was the time when my brother, Jay, was competed and got Badger State governorship for Wisconsin. And Governor Thompson had a reception and invited, him to go and join the reception. That night, my mom was able to do her broken English and say, "Hi, my name's Sia, how are you?" Right? Doing her small talk. My dad, all he did just shake his hand and smile. He couldn't say anything more than that. And so when he came home, we asked him, "So Dad, how was it meeting the governor?" And he just took a long, deep breath and he said, "I had a whole stomach of words, but they won't come out." Meaning, he wished he could speak so he could, speak with the governor. So that's my dad. His word of wisdom for us is every Christmas, like Hmong families, you gather together and you eat and you talk and you review lives within that year and plan for next year. And his word for us every single year was, "I brought you here. The school is in front of your doorstep. If you don't study hard, it's not my fault." And that's all he said. So, success stories. We become citizens, so we could vote, right? Appleton has the first Hmong running for alderman in the 90s. Zong. He is now in Milwaukee. Young guy at the time, very energetic. And then Mimo grew up in Appleton. Me and I used to, so in the early day for us, our income comes from seasonal workers in Wapaka. I don't know, you guys know what I'm talking about. Where we go pick strawberries, we go pick cucumbers and turn them into pickles, right? Early in the morning, we would be, sleeping in the back of my of Sing's station wagon, leaving here about 5 in the morning and got there at sunrise and start doing pickle, right? So me and I do many summer of that together. And me is one of those children that took to heart, study hard, and be their boss. So she went on to law school, practiced law, and was the first Hmong in the nation to be elected to a state Senate seat in Minnesota. Yeah. And all of that because, as I will say more and more, when we have a good foundation here in Appleton, good school, good, neighbor, and good growing, we have a good foundation, a strong foundation to go on. And so in the 20s, we have Mainua. Many of you may have met her. She just became, one of your city councilmen. We also have educators, professors, Hmong. In those pictures that I show you, the little kids that are today's professionals. So here we have Kajua Bapsilo. She has a degree in pharmacy, and she is now the chair of the Department of Clinical Science at Medical College. She has so many wonderful stories that I also could relate to, and that is, she's a young Hmong woman, and she's supervising very seasoned Caucasian men in the department. And that was, quite a challenge for her because they could not accept that she's their boss. They still think that she's a student intern instead of their boss. But for the last 5 years, I think they're kind of adjusting to it. But when she first went in for the first 5 years, it was very hard for her to adjust because of her role and her gender. this woman grew up here in Appleton as well and is a professor at UW Oshkosh now. Or we have, kids who grew up here are today's entrepreneurs and professionals. So like Diana owns lots of property in Milwaukee, as well as having smoothie shops at the mall and raising 3 small children like this right now. Or John is a professional in technology where he writes software programs. And Chang, same thing, he does software program, but he didn't like the cold weather, so he is in Texas now. Jay, this is my brother Jay that I talked about that became Badger State. He is in Boston. He used to be at Harvard teaching, but he is now doing, he's not teaching anymore. He's down to the training department. And many of you may not know, but in Green Bay, where in the spring and the fish comes up to do their business. It's a joy and pride for us to be entertained. So we go there every year. My dad put in a big fire like this, and it's very common for my family to go in and have a fun time with the fish. Watching the fish come up, going against the water and so forth. So those are our entertainments, that we do as a family growing up. Teachers, lawyers, these kids in the 80s when we arrived are, young girls. Today, they are young professional here. She is a 5th grade teacher here in Appleton, and with her stature, she is so small, I couldn't believe it, but she is a corporate lawyer in town here. And when she's in her suit, she looks serious, but without her suit, I just couldn't think of her as a lawyer. Integration, again, continue to be what we talked about. So Valley Funeral Home has been very responsive to the Hmong community, and we're very thankful for the leadership of Wayne, where, because of the nature of the funeral practices, it generates a lot of crowd, it generates a lot of traffic, and then the funeral home has to be big in order to accommodate all the activity, right? So for funeral home directors who cannot handle the Hmong funeral, they stop renting to the Hmong. So like in Madison, we have to go all the way to Oregon because right in Madison, the funeral home, they won't do it for traditional funeral. They would do it for Christian because Christian is kind of, cut and paste like others now. And so we, got run out to far away. But in Appleton, we were very thankful for the leadership here at Valley Funeral Home, where they took on the opportunity to be, a business for the Hmong, which is a huge thing where we can practice our culture and preserve the tradition, why we pay a little bit more than, what other people would pay. And so that has become a really good thing. So this is where I was talking earlier about having representative in your funeral home. This is the stages where they, each person represents each part in your life. Maybe your uncle, maybe your aunt, maybe your in-law, and so they go through how many offspring you produce, do you owe anybody anything, go through a list of questions, and that's how they conclude your life on earth and so forth. So that's why it takes a lot of time. We have Hmong musical instrument that accompanies the soul back to their birthplace, as well as accompany them on the way to the burial site. And so these are very deep rituals that still happen And in places like Appleton where they don't have to worry about, the challenges of neighbor and all of that, they could do a much more thorough in the practice of the tradition than other places. Other parts that is very successful in our community is lifestyle. Our children now have the freedom to live by themselves, to marry whoever they like, and to, do the things that they feel is good for them, compared to in my time where everybody have to, get married by a certain age and have kids by a certain age, right? So that integration of, success story is now something that is good for the community overall. We have, those small kids. This is a very successful family here, the Zong family in town here. They are a heck of a parents that really know how to discipline their kids. So all the kids ranges from like lawyers to nurses and doctors. And they're all spread out between Minnesota, California, and Wisconsin. Yeah, so another successful family is the family that I talked about, the gentleman that was responsible for all of it. This is his daughter. She's also a congressman in Minnesota. Or we have, young women who are doing other things other than politics and that. And so like Ying is the head of the Syria Health Foundation in California. So other things that you probably already know is right now we have a trend of emerging Hmong leaders who are leading the way here in Appleton. And you've probably seen your first Hmong American Day Festival last year, right? And there's a new Hmong professional group that is led by Long and Pam that's also doing a lot of wonderful things. You have your Hmong principal here that you can consult about education. You have Bali, who is now the director at the district in equity and inclusion. And you have a very successful family who grow up, eating and doing cooking, and now are opening restaurants left to right. They have, I think, 3 for sure, and I think I heard even up to like 5 restaurants in town owned by their family. Or you have, artists who are using their experiences to create their arts. So to say to all of you tonight is, the fruit of Appleton's labor should be rested on all of you as individuals who helped out during the resettlement of Hmong refugees, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a social worker, you're a librarian, you're nurses, whatever you do that has an impact in the Hmong families, this is your fruit of your labor. All of these success stories comes on and grow because you gave them a good foundation. So wherever they go now, that's who they are, and that's what they're contributing as Wisconsinites. But their home started right here in Appleton.